It's real now. Welcome, everybody. I think I know everybody who's both online and in the room. I'm Constance Prenier, and I am pleased to introduce and welcome our mayor, Chris Roberts, who will talk a little bit about whatever he wants to talk about. You're not constrained by anything tonight.
This could be good or could be dangerous. It's just good to see here. I know it's it's not the end of the summer officially, but with school starting and a whole lot of new people going to getting around Shoreline, new ways of getting around Shoreline, coming to City Hall may not be on the first thought of everyone's mind. Oh, we even have our city manager here today too. Like a full house. So for anyone who's watching or who will watch this, we have a couple big things that are going to happen this year towards the end of the year that we're working on right now. The first is our comprehensive plan. The Planning Commission is going through its final edits on its plan, and it's going to be coming to council sooner than we know it, with the goal of adoption of a comprehensive plan in late November or December. And that's about the same time as our budget. So every year we have a 2-year budget cycle, and so every even year is when we do our full 2-year process. And so a lot of work that has been going on by the staff and council priorities are going to be in that budget. So those are the big things that are going to happen in terms of what's going to happen within City Hall over the next few months. And it will sort of make up for the relatively slow, at least for me, it felt like last 6 months or so, where we did some good things. I mean, we adopted a human service strategic plan. We went through our surface water strategic plan, and so we did lots of good work over the previous 6 months. But in terms of sort of the bigger items where we're going to see where maybe some of the bigger impacts are going to happen later this year. And so I do encourage everyone to participate and follow along. Track our budget, track our comprehensive plan, and do make comments. I mean, we do want to hear from the community on all of these topics. Since it is Human Service Day, I mean, I will talk mention a couple of things about the Human Service Strategic Plan. And I think it's a really good plan that was adopted by the council that really is going to, instead of just, okay, this is where we're sending money to, but actually having and leading to a place where we're going to have goals for what we want to accomplish with some of those dollars we spend out, and also sort of increase. I think there's a commitment to increase some of the dollars that we send out. If you're not aware, and again, I know the people who are watching know this, but if someone gets this recording, most of the human services that we provide are contracted out with the Center for Human Services, with HopeLink, variety of human service providers. And so we do have some closer connections with some human services. The RACER program, which is a contract, but it's contracted through the city of Kirkland, and we have a interest in that as a city, and we have Councilmember Ransdale's on the board of that organization. So, but with the new strategic plan, we are going to actually we do want to measure, and we do want to not only track sort of how many Shoreline residents receive services, but our staff, which is going to expand, assuming that the council adopts the budget, But the strategic plan not only adds more staff, but also gives the staff the capacity to say, okay, what are the outcomes we want to see? It's not just tracking, okay, how many people are served, but okay, how are we making a difference? How are we reducing hunger? How are we reducing income inequality? All of these things, we can actually say, okay, this is our goal, and we're going to work with their providers so they can reach those goals. And again, not just sort of checking boxes of how many residents are served, which is an important metric. I'm not going to deny that, but that's not the outcome that is the city that we are looking for. That's not just servicing people and providing meals is not. It's reducing hunger. That is our goal. I guess I'm going to stop there and take questions from the audience and from online. So on any topic whatsoever. So this is Constance. This is where I really get into trouble.
There's no microphone.
We can.
If you'll take, because Chris is using.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is, you mentioned about an expansion in staff. Are you talking about human services in particular or overall citywide?
In our strategic plan, it was the one piece of that is recommending increase in human service staff, just specifically. And I cannot remember all the details. Yeah. Okay. But yes, there is a specific human service staff increase because a one-person team or barely a one-person team is not sufficient. It is not comparable to if you look at all the other our peer cities, they have double or even triple the amount of staff that we have. Even if they are contracting and providing most of their services through a third-party contractor.
Appreciate all that the city's doing for people in the city. Human services are a key part of people's well-being. So I have Shoreline Community Care is one of the things I've been doing for the last 23 years. And until recently, that was funded entirely by churches and individuals. With COVID, we started getting some city funding. And our budget went from 20,000, we're now up to around 90,000. And so the number of people we're helping, the amount of money we're given, it's all increased. So there's an easy way for me to look at and think, how are we doing? And that is look at how many people we helped, look at how much money we gave out. But I have this nagging question, and that is, are we really making a difference? And how would you measure that? And so it's one thing to say how many people you helped. It's another thing to say how many evictions did you prevent? How many utility shutoffs did you prevent? How many kids got a meal today? Whatever. But you start to use those kind of metrics. And the problem with that, I went to Seattle City Light and begged and begged and begged, and they finally said, okay, we'll tell you how many shutoffs for Seattle City Light in Shoreline. So it's 1,300 in the last 2 years. That's a daunting figure to me. I look at the number of people we helped in Shoreline Community Care, and maybe it's 50 people we prevented a shutoff, but 50 versus 1,300. So 1,300 people got shut off. I asked the water district how many people got shut off and have all kinds of numbers, but you know, that's a health crisis. You're not being able to wash, clean up, flush the toilet, whatever. That's a daunting crisis. So people getting those type of experiences, we need to figure out a better answer than we're doing. And I'm not talking just about the city. I'm saying all of us in human services, we're failing some people. And that's kind of hard. I'm not sure what the entire answer is, but I like something you mentioned, Racer, and I like something that Racer is doing, along with every other good thing they're doing, is they invoked a community resource team people that have lived experience with the behavioral health crisis in some form or another. I'm on that. You can draw your own conclusion. But the fact is that group of people whose lived experience is what crisis response is trying to address has given insight into how the program should work and what's gone wrong and what's gone right. And we probably need to extend that to human services. I looked at this strategic report. I see where St. Dunstan's and Center for Human Services and Canopy and get the other one was asked, um, what are your experiences as clients? What are your needs? That's a big piece of it. Another piece of it is how are we actually meeting those needs? And if we're not, what do we need to do different? And that needs to be not just something we did once for a report, but an ongoing, tell us what we need to do better. Tell us where we're falling short. Tell us what we're doing right, but get that information going on a regular basis and informing all of the agencies, all of the city work. How can we do better? Thanks.
And I think that's what the plan is. By having more staff, we can actually go into depth and really understand how are we serving the residents of Shoreline, what needs are being met, what needs are not being met. And that's the goal. Because I think our council recognized that while we're doing well on some metrics, it's not meeting the needs of everyone. It's not, and it's not necessarily, we're not seeing decreases in, or we're not seeing how we're actually meeting the needs of individuals who are in need of the support the city can have. And at the end of the day, we do recognize that human services is woefully underfunded from the state level, from the federal level. We get some money from the state, we get some money from the federal government, but compared to transportation projects or compared to lots of these other projects, it's not very much, and it's only can be used for in certain ways, and so it's often difficult to administrate those dollars in the same way that some other funds are much more flexible. Some other types of projects, some other types of grants are much more flexible in terms of how they can be used and how they can be used. Well, they're here for this project, but well, we can actually also use it for this project, and it makes it hard. But I mean, that's but again, the goal is we need to serve and help people, and it takes a team, it takes a village to actually to do that. And the city is an important resource for people, and we need to do better. And I think with the strategic plan, and once it's fully adopted, we should have the resources, we should have the capacity to do a much better job of trying to really know and make an impact in the community.
So,
Well,
so
before-
is there,
there's-
is
first
there
let's just
something
see if there's
online?
anyone in mind. No.
Okay. So just a comment. Hooray for the city to wanting to beef up human services at the grassroots level to meet the people on the street that need the help the most, because otherwise part two is considering a much larger contract for King County's Sheriff's Department because we're not taking care of people. So then law enforcement a lot of times ends up being the next level. So let's get it done right the first time.
And this is where everything interacts with each other, is that if we can help people, if we can help make sure people can stay in their homes and get the support they need in a secure space, safe space for them, then they are not, then people, and you give people, and you also have to give people hope. You have to make sure people have a job, a meaningful job, or some sort of meaningful experience that you sort of look forward to. You have that sort of reason to be, and the reason to be sort of part of the community, then we don't need, then people are not going to sort of spiral. And if people have that mental support, health support, they have their employers give them the mental health days. so that people can rest and recharge and deal with and have the time to deal with problems that come up, the access to counseling, access to therapy, all of these things to sort of help people stay in the situation that they're in and not have to resort to other things which can cause harm to themselves or harm to other people or property. And so it's much easier to to help people when they're in a safe space, when they're in an affordable home. And so all this is where, again, all of these things come together. We need affordable housing, we need behavioral support services, we need mental health services, we need physical health services, we need all of this so that we do not have to involve law enforcement or in the criminal justice system to come in, because that's much more expensive for the community. That's not necessarily helping people, but it's the last resort. And I mean, we need public safety that's in place. Public safety and our police officers play an important role in our community. But that should be the last resort. And so you need all these things together to function together to have a healthy community. And I know this is where many neighborhood associations, and I know Bill, you in particular, is have that some of that support comes from your neighbors. And so if you have strong neighborhood associations, you have strong block watches, then you know what's happening on your block. You know the people who need additional help. And people can feel more willing to say, hey, I need help with this. We have the Shoreline Tool Library now, which is an important thing. So people who need that one piece of equipment just so they can help clean and maintain their deck. And so it doesn't become a hazard in the future. That we can share, but with this part of the sharing economy, it's so important and so vital that we individually cannot do everything. We cannot bear the brunt of the world. We can't even necessarily bear the weight of all of our families and the drama of our families on our shoulders ourselves. We need people, we need our neighbors. We need people we need to rely on our neighbors to help us in times of need, to whether it's something simple of taking out the trash can before trash day, because maybe you notice that it's not out at 7, 8 o'clock at night, and maybe checking in, maybe there's something wrong. Maybe there's something that you can help with. But maybe it is just taking out the trash, taking your neighbor's trash can to the street can be a huge help for people, especially people with mobility challenges. My mother-in-law just had knee surgery, and she was alone, and her neighbor recognized that and would take out the trash, and it was a long driveway. So I mean, that's the small things that can be done. But you start building the small things, and you start caring for each other, and you start becoming family, and then you you provide that important support for your neighbors, and that's a good thing, and that's something that I think that we have in some parts of Shoreline where you have really good connections, and then there's some places in Shoreline where that can be improved. So, but that's something we should work forward to. And that doesn't necessarily need the city involvement, but I mean, it is a worthwhile goal. It's an approach that we need to take. Nothing online still? It is a quiet group. Well, it's good seeing you. Oh, no. You have a loud voice, but we have an online audience who.
All right. So one of the things that I learned in the process out here actually involved with the neighborhood association. I don't think I was involved in a neighborhood association back east, but got out here and, I showed up at the first neighborhood association meeting and there was 3 people. And I said, where's everybody? And what I learned is when you come to a meeting and don't look and see who's there, you look and see who's missing. And I saw a whole bunch of my neighbors missing. So I started talking to some people and said, why don't we get together block by block and just go around and find a person on each block who will check on their neighbors. All they have to do is that block. There's only both sides of the street, one block, 20 homes, most. Apartments might be a different story. But if you get to know the 20 people in your immediate block, you probably can make it work. We did that for a long time. In some parts of Briarcrest, that's still going on. I walk around and there's people who say, I remember you. I haven't seen you in 5 years. How do you know? That's what happens when you build that connection. Who's missing? I haven't seen you. What's going on? That's what we need to be able to do. I don't know if the city has a role directly in that, but I run into a lot of people who've asked me this really bizarre question. Who told you you could do that? And I'm thinking, nobody had to tell me to do that, but obviously people feel like I can't just go knock on somebody's door. What are they going to say? Hey, what are you soliciting? What are you, I'm going to call the cops. It doesn't really happen. But people need to know that they own some of the responsibility for the life and well-being of the people in their block, in their city, in their neighborhood. And somebody has to tell them that. I don't know how to do that exactly, but just doing it. But it's really what people need to hear. You have ownership of the well-being of the people around you. Use it, don't lose it. Get involved, ask questions, make mistakes. We have something called the warm line. I don't know if you've heard of that, the warm line. It's as opposed to somebody is suicidal and they're calling 211 and it gets ugly in a hurry, right? But I'm not suicidal. I just need to talk to somebody. Who do I talk to? And the warm line is supposed to fill that gap. And so it's between, oh no, total crisis and I'm okay. I don't really need to talk to anybody. But somewhere in between, there's a lot of people, and I include myself. Some days I just need to talk to somebody. And we need to encourage that. We need to make that part of public awareness. We know about 211, now we know about 988, but there's got to be this warm line for people just saying, I need to talk to somebody. I don't know what to do with this bill. What do I make that something that's just part of our mindset? I walk down the street. If I don't see my neighbor, I got to ask, what's going on? I better go check. We can do that.
Yeah, one of the things I really like about Shoreline and Shoreline's residents and the associations that they've built is that Shoreline has, at least for the last several years, has had over 100 national night out parties. And Patty and I were
Just stole my thunder, Mayor.
sorry, but we have so many block parties that are hosted by individuals and individual blocks, and they're the ones going out and talking to their neighbors, and they're building communities, whether it's through barbecue or through an axe throwing contest. However you want to do it. Our police chief is a pretty good axe thrower or a former police chief. I'll cry. But this is and that's the perfect scale, Bill, as you mentioned earlier. That's the perfect scale. It is block by block, people getting to know each other. Some of our other peer cities have 1 or 2 big community celebrations on National Night Out. It's a good community celebration. There's no problem with that. But in terms of actually getting to know who your neighbors are and, oh, I haven't seen you in a couple of years. How have you been? Or, wow, look how many kids are now on the block. And it's great to see them all playing together. And suddenly now you have a whole bunch of kids running through people's yards the rest of the summer. That's the great thing about the way that Shoreline sort of has allowed and has all these national night out parties. I think that's a really good thing, and I believe is the right approach.
So just real quick, because I don't want Bethany to have to recreate the wheel. Yes, Block Watch is huge for neighbors watching out for each other, but so is the emergency preparedness program that we have had some focus on and off through the city of Shoreline, because it's also neighbor getting to know neighbor, what the needs are on your block, who needs special care, or who should be checked up on a regular basis. So we don't need to create new programs. We need to take advantage of the ones that already exist and are proven to work well.
Thank you, Patty. And with that, I'm going to turn it over, I believe, to Bethany to talk about the specifics of our human service plan. And you're all mic'd up, I think.
I am mic'd up. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kendall. Well, I really appreciate the discussion we've had so far. I do think everyone in here knows me, but I will introduce myself. My name is Bethany Wahlberg Dunn. I am the city's community services manager. And when earlier we mentioned that we previously had more human services staff, that was me in 2000 when I was hired here in human services. We had 2 full-time staff working in human services, and I was one of them. And so now we have about 0.4 of my time. Over the last 25 years, I sort of made my way out of human services into grant writing. So whether or not you like the Aurora Corridor, the purchase of Krugerberg, the purchase of Southwoods, the Interurban Trail, I had a hand in that. And it was really fun to learn all about concrete and trees and to be able to be put up in a bucket truck to take pictures of Cromwell Park and things like that. But I'm really happy to be back in an area to serve, that we serve people directly. So I'm really happy to be back in community services. So before we get to more specific about the Human Services Strategic Plan, just a little bit of background on what the Community Services Division is. We have 4, I like to call them lines of business. We have the Environmental Sustainability Program, which includes solid waste and our Climate Action Plan, Climate Action Implementation, Equity and Social Justice, which Suni, who will be joining me up here in a little bit, manages. We have the Neighborhoods Program, which Constance, who is our short timer here before retirement, and then the Housing and Human Services Program. So within that, we have the human services and all the funding that goes along with that. And we also manage the city's multifamily tax exemption program. So that program is also managed in community services in collaboration with the planning department. So as this was talked about previously, the city is only one part of this whole entire system of services that when people need help is there for them. So, and even before people get to this point where they need money because their power's being turned off, they are short on rent, their kids' feet are growing at a huge amount and is literally holes are growing in them, and yet they need gas to get to work. Before they're even there, there's systemic things that put them in a situation where their wages are not keeping up with inflation. That's the challenge. Like our program can't necessarily impact that. So that's why there's other people at the city working on economic development, working on keeping our streets safe, making sure we have transportation, you know, the light rail, all of those things, that we have a robust community. So folks are working on that, and then we're trying to work on making sure people, when they do run into trouble, have a safety net of services to fall back on. So we're only one of those things. We provide direct funding to agencies, as was indicated earlier. Later in the presentation, we'll go over how much funding we've been providing and what types of agencies we do fund. But as you can see here, and this list is not all, exhaustive, but these are all the other ways that people get help. So as was mentioned, neighborhoods, everyone knows I've got a doctor's appointment. Can you watch Susie for me while I go do that? That's a need. Maybe they can't afford it. Maybe they don't have parents around. Who knows? Libraries, my goodness, are a huge source of help. Tax help for elderly and low income folks through United Way at the libraries. You know, all the state programs that folks can get access to for healthcare, and they used to call them food stamps, but now they're the EBT cards. Huge. Police, you know, we mentioned earlier as well. We have the wonderful RACER program of behavioral health folks that can be deployed in our community. I know we have actually called them with folks that we've interacted with in community services, and they're just an amazing help. And it's really great to work for a city that understands that behavioral health is really important and to be on the forefront of that. So yeah, there's a lot of different places, churches, a lot of ways, and we're just one part of that. And we're not alone. We can't do it all ourselves. So why do we need a plan? Well, the city does do a resident satisfaction survey, and over the last few surveys, most recently 2022, and the 2024 one, information will be presented to council on Monday night, the 9th. Top service needs were that the survey said that the city should work on is overall response to homelessness and overall quality of human services. So we looked at that and said, gosh, we're not, you know, we don't really have the staff to get a lot of data on that. And is there another way or other ways we should be doing things? So we requested some funding from council through our budget process to look to contract for, you know, working on that plan, and looked for ways to focus the limited funds we do have. And then also we did receive some funding through COVID from the federal government, and we're just seeing there's going to be a cliff at the end of 2024 and how we prepare for that. And then just needing a comprehensive review of the entire program. That's staffing, that's what we fund, that's how we fund it, all of those things. So that's what the intent of this the plan process was meant to do. So the objectives of the plan, as you can see here, were to review the data that we have and information, and that means like how much we funded things in the past, how we've gotten here, review other cities, and we'll go over that later as well in terms of our neighboring cities and cities that have about our population. Look at what policies are out there for funding, and prepare a 6-year implementation plan, and then provide some rationale for an appropriate level of funding. So within that, we worked with a consultant called Burke Consulting, and they've worked with the city on some other projects as well, to do a materials review where they collected a bunch of data and information, a bunch of information from the city, whether that be the comprehensive plan, or we did have some old needs assessments for the city, and they looked at census data, which is a bunch of information. They did some service provider organization interviews. We felt like we had a pretty good sense of what the needs were. I mean, we all do, right? There's not enough money. People don't have enough money to pay for their bills. They often are one paycheck away, one car repair away from not having enough rent money. So we wanted to hear more from the people in the trenches doing the work, what their thoughts were on problem solving and figuring that thing out. Burke Consulting also worked on the peer jurisdiction interviews. We had a city focus group. And then Burke did a little bit of a deep dive with a couple of, 5 to be exact, specific community partners that worked with some of their clients to do this like in-depth talk, interview process. And we'll talk about some of those results later, but that was, again, just to get a little more in depth. And through that, they were folks that we do fund and people that we don't fund, because we wanted to make sure we were getting all sorts of organizations' ideas going. So again, this information is available. Don't try to write it down. But you can see, obviously, the overall quality of police services. We love our police, and we appreciate and want to maintain their quality too. But you can see how high the response to homelessness, and it obviously is a very, I'm not going to say issue, but it's a very high visibility thing happening in our region and in the country right now. So it's not unexpected that it be as high as it is. So for some context, our population is becoming increasingly more diverse, racially diverse. We have just over 60,000 people. We have slower and more stable growth than King County as a whole, on average. We have average lower income. We have a higher percentage of older adults and people with disabilities, which again, not surprising. It's been that way for a while. Than King County as a whole. And we do know that the critical needs have been made worse by the pandemic, including that financial stability piece, housing, and behavioral health issues. So as I talked about earlier, these were our engagement partners that we did interviews with. And right now we only have contracts, I was wrong, there's 4 of them. We have contracts right now with Canopy Scholars and Center for Human Services. And then those are the interviews that we did with those agencies. So in terms of what we were hearing about the highest human services needs, basically broken into 3 categories. Again, nothing surprising here. Housing and homelessness. Let me check my notes here really quick because I think there's some additional things. So really this comes down to just affordability of apartments, how many bedrooms are in apartments. We hear that all the time that families want to stay here, but there's not enough 3 and 4 bedroom apartments. Related to behavioral health, we hear that it's really hard to get, you can get the crisis appointment, but then it's really hard to get the ongoing appointments. Our agencies like CHS is a great agency that figures out what benefits you can get. But it's hard to get all those benefits going and get those things lined up when you're in crisis. And there is a lack of providers of behavioral health services. So that remains something tough. And it's hard for the agencies to pay what they can pay. A lot of the mental health providers just go into private practice where they can charge what they charge. So, and then the third category is the basic needs, including food assistance and medical care. And then a couple other large needs shown were tutoring assistance and financial and employment assistance. And by financial there, we mean like managing, budgeting, those type of items. So specifically relating to housing and homelessness, like I said, people are struggling to find apartments big enough. We have seen requests to help avoid evictions. And as I think Bill mentioned, providing that housing and rental assistance is kind of a Band-Aid because some of these items are just built in and systemic to that household's situation. While rent should really be, 30%, 40% of your income, some people are paying 60 to 70% because that's what they have to do to get here. So that's a challenge. And a lot of these programs, these community-based organizations that provide rent, they can only provide it once a year, things like that. So it is really a Band-Aid until the next time something breaks. So that is a challenge. In terms of behavioral health, like I mentioned, it's at capacity with people that have the private insurance. And then there's that duality of folks that have both behavioral health and substance abuse issues. And then there needs to be some support for support groups for folks in different communities, whether that's Spanish speakers, African American, or certain religions. There just needs to be support groups that serve other communities. And here's the list of all the basic needs. Just list them out there. There could be even more. Obviously, I'm just pulling out childcare because that is, everyone needs childcare help. That's a huge issue. Yeah, utility assistance, medical care, transportation, all of those things. The basic, that baseline in Maslow's triangle right there, just right there. We need it. So some other considerations and some other like themes that popped up as they were doing their interviews and deep dives with these agencies is sometimes there's a lack of knowledge of all the services that were available. So, sometimes it would be, oh, I didn't even know that XYZ agency had that possible. That's interesting. They also felt there needed to be a tailored community approach, whether that's, I describe that as like a navigator, someone that knows this information and can do that warm handoff versus, here's a list of people, go call that yourself. The ongoing and high need for services. People really want to live in Shoreline. They like it here. As someone that has worked here for a long time, that warms my heart. We want to work in a community that is people want to live in. And we want people who want to be here. And it's really hard when there's not affordable places for families to grow. And we need to look into how to continue to support the aging community that we do have. Whether that's through our senior center, not our senior center, the senior center, through programs that we have at our recreation, through a variety of ways. So that is kind of the basis of the information provided. And then Suni's going to jump in here and talk a little bit about our current status of where we are with our programs.
Hi, everyone. I'm Suni. I work, as Bethany said, as the Equity and Social Justice Program Coordinator. That's 0.6 of my time, and then 0.4 of my time is as a Community Support Specialist. My background is in social work. I worked for the City of Seattle Human Services Department for over 10 years, and so it's been great to be here at Shoreline because I only live a couple blocks away. So just to give Bethany a little break, talk a little bit about what our current human services funding looks like. So in 2023 and 2024, we had over $759,000 per year from our general fund. We also had a $176,000 in one-time spending for 2024. And also funds from the American Rescue Plan Act, the COVID response, which ends in 2024. So the additional funds, like I said, 0.4 of that was my time. We also had another community support person, Judy Krugeru, who many folks may know. But we also were able to fund like Shoreline Community Care and some other community partners, Canopy Scholars, Charmed Behavioral Health to address the behavioral health needs, and provided some additional funding to Center for Human Services for their family support program. So in our ongoing funding, the sort of competitive funding pot that we have, as you can see, we have the big categories. So basic needs and homelessness, and the agencies that we fund, you can see they're listed underneath the big categories. So we provide funding to Crisis Connections, Eastside Legal Assistance Program, Hope Link, Lake City Partners Ending Homelessness, Mary's Place, Seattle. For older adult funding, a lot of the majority of again, this is the competitive funding, so the funding that agencies apply for goes to Sound Generations, and the community dining, Meals on Wheels, and volunteer transportation services are accessed at our Shoreline Lake Forest Park Senior Center. With our counseling and behavioral health programs, Center for Human Services, Harborview Medical Center, King County Sexual Assault Resource Center. And again, you'll see Center for Human Services as a provider in our that provides services for children and youth, child care resources, Wonderland Child and Family Services. In that pie chart, you can see the bulk, about 55% of the funding goes towards basic needs and homelessness. The other 25% for counseling behavioral health, about 17% children and youth, and for older adults, about 3%. This doesn't include the ongoing programming that we provide because the city does have additional funds that is set aside specific for our senior center and for like some of our youth programs. In addition to being a funder, the city sees its role as connecting with our connecting regionally with our partners, locally with our partners. And so here are some of the organizations that we help connect with. One of the community resource team, which Bethany co-leads with the Shoreline School District. And that's a bi-monthly group that of different community organizations, school district staff, like family advocates or school counselors, just to check in with each other, hear what are some of the pressing needs or themes that are happening in community, and see how we can support one another, share resources, and just be connected with one another. Shoreline is a small community, so it's important for us to be able to know what's happening. We also have our Human Services Funding Collaborative. So the previous slide I showed was, as I said, the competitive funds. So we have funds that agencies apply to every 2 years. And what a lot of the suburban cities do to make it easier on agencies is we participate in this funding collaborative. So an agency can apply for multiple cities using the same application and questions and just sort of tailor the request and the numbers of participants or the type of services. But that is a pretty helpful and important group to be part of. As you know, people travel across borders. We're not just in Shoreline. We go up north in Linwood, and now that we have the light rail, it's even easier. So it's important for us, again, to be connected regionally, and that goes to the next few partners you see: King County Regional Homelessness Authority, the North King County Coalition on Homelessness, the North Urban Human Services Alliance, and we've been a partner with the Shoreline PTA Holiday Baskets event, which a lot of community effort and support goes to every year. The last few years has been at Dale Turner YMCA, where the Y has provided the space for families to come, and the Shoreline Fire Department brings a ton of gifts for school age and younger kids, and the families can come and pick out gifts for their kids, and also get connected to other resources. So last year, HopeLink brought their mobile grocery van, I guess you could call it, and so folks were able to get food as well. And HopeLink had a resource table to give people more information about the other programs they provide. And as Bethany was saying, the staffing level for human services has definitely been, as they call it, lean in the city. Bethany is our community services manager and also the human services expert. And so she definitely works more than 40 hours, but we'll say 0.4 of her time is an estimate. And then with the COVID money, we're able to have myself and Judy Kaguru provide community support. And so we have a phone line and an email address where people can call in and ask for resources. Someone just called in, I think it was yesterday, but it was yesterday, and he was saying his water heater, he's 83 years old, his water heater broke, and he doesn't have the funds. And do we have any resources? So just helping people connect on a, there is 211, which I actually did use to help find resources for him, but having someone local in Shoreline, it has been helpful. In the Human Services Strategic Plan, as Bethany was saying, other jurisdictions were interviewed as part of the data collection because we need some context, like how does the city compare with our other neighbors and especially like similar size. And so these cities were interviewed, and it's interesting on a staffing level, for example, the city of Bothell has 3.25 FTE, Issaquah has 10 FTE, Kenmore has 1 FTE, 1 full-time employee, Kirkland has 5, city of Renton has 4.5. So it's very clear the Shoreline, even 20 years ago when Bethany first started as a baby here in Shoreline, we had 2 FTE. So as a staffing level, we, definitely, as I said, we're very lean, and that was identified as a big area that we could improve upon. As far as funding goes, that's also an area Bethany talked about. We would like to increase our funding. The COVID, federal funds was very helpful, and also we really still need it. It's obviously the economic impacts with COVID it's not gone, and so actually, again, more and more calls for rental assistance as the COVID support programs have been ending and those funds have been exhausted. And so how do we, on a systemic level, make change? We need to put some energy and resource into that, and it's not something that just happens overnight. We have to have the staff capacity to do that. So it's just interesting to see as a city where our funding for the competitive funds go. Again, this is not the whole of the entirety, but just for some context here. And as I mentioned, the big kind of takeaways from the discussions our consultant had with the other cities is that we want to be able to sustain a lot of the work that we were able to do and the support we were able to provide when we have the COVID money. So how do we keep that? We want to look at how we contract and be a little bit more strategic and have some clear priorities and make sure that we're serving the whole community equitably and also just efficiently. So we have several contracts that have small awards like $5,000, and it is nice to be able to provide that. That is also not necessarily what the agencies want. They would like to have more robust funding for their programs, so that was a principle to think about as we look at our future funding. And then internally with staffing and our strategic decision making, again, how do we look at doing this work with adequate staffing? And the point of us doing the whole strategic plan is that that's something that our neighboring cities also have in place or have been working on, and that also we're all continue to be engaged as Bethany pointed out with the resident satisfaction survey. Homelessness in this region is a huge priority, so we need to stay connected and work with our partners around this area. And I think actually this is back to you.
So I did want to make one note about the last bullet on the slide 21, which mentioned King County Regional Homelessness Authority. So a couple of years ago, I believe in December of 2022 or August of 2022, apologies. It all blends together sometimes. The city did enter into an interlocal agreement with the 4 other north end cities of the county with KCRHA, which is the King County Regional Homelessness Authority, to become a member of the authority. So what does that mean exactly? So that means that we provide the funding that we would spend on projects that are related to serving homeless folks. So we have an outreach program through Lake City Partners, and we also fund the Oaks at Lake City Partners. We fund HopeLink, has a shelter for families, and also Mary's Place. So the funding that the council approved in their 23 and 24 budget, specifically for those programs and those dollar amounts, we sent to KCRHA to implement exactly as council indicated. The interlocal agreement has a minimum per capita, according to how many residents we have. And we're actually above that. And I'm happy about that. That's good. So the second half we started with like a 4-year interlocal just to see how it goes. They're actually providing us a report on 23 and halfway through 24 on the 23rd of this month at council. So if you are interested in hearing information about how that has been going, please listen in to that or come. And we're the only thing on the agenda that day that's not on consent. So come see the show. Because I truly believe that homelessness is a regional issue and we can't just solve it here. So we really have to work in collaboration with them. But they're really committed to, working with the cities. We actually successfully worked with them to have a severe weather shelter contract. Previously, the city was working with NUSA, and it was a great partnership, but it was a lot of staff intensive, namely me and some other folks, working great with St. Dunstan's. They're amazing to have the shelter be open with volunteers. And it just became really clear that that wasn't a sustainable model. We needed professional folks. And so we put some funding from the city, council approved that, which is awesome, and some other funding from the other North End cities together. St. Dunstan's and had a contract with Seattle Urban League, and that worked great. And now Seattle Urban League is also doing like warm weather, like severe weather in the heat. It's going to be like 90 degrees tomorrow in Woodinville. Like it's pretty hot. So they're doing that too. So that's been a great partnership. So we're really, the agency is relatively new, but I'm happy with the way it's moving forward. So just wanted to note that about KCRJ. So what we're seeing is in terms of identifying the problem. Obviously, the need that we're seeing, as I think Bill so eloquently noted, is it's unmeasurable. Like I know we had some human services partners at a council dinner meeting earlier in this year, and a council member asked someone at HopeLink, like, how much money could you give out per month? And she was like, flabbergasted, like no one's ever, like I couldn't even imagine how much that money that would be. So even the service providers are like, I could never know how much that would be. So it's really hard to understand that, huge number. So the need is significantly higher than we have. And I think it's fair to say it would be out of, to really fund everyone's, rent assistance every month is probably way out of line, but it is significantly higher than we currently have invested. Obviously, by the survey, we said residents want the city to invest resources to respond to homelessness and provide these high quality human services. They want to take care of their fellow residents, their neighbors. Some community members do lack this awareness or access to existing services. So that is a note to the city staff that we need to work on that, figure out where the gaps are, figure out what we can do about that, working with our partners. And that we've stated too, current city human services staff capacity is lower than in the past and is low compared to peer cities. So the recommendations that were made from our consultant and included in the report were to increase staff capacity, increase the funding, and then track the impact. So metrics, outcomes, all of those things. all of those things that some of the agencies are, I'd say most of the agencies are reporting on, but we have not been, other than making sure they're meeting their, they've said they're going to serve 100 people with X many meals. I can tell you, I can guarantee you when I sign the invoice, that's what they're doing. But they're turning in outcomes. We just don't have the capacity to, one, work with them to make sure, like you said, Bill, that they're meaningful, right? That they're staying housed after 6 months, if that was one of their, their outcomes. And then making sure, seeing how many of them are meeting their outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. So we're excited to hopefully add a staff member, a housing and human services manager, to help set that up. It's going to take a little bit to get going, but we're excited about that. So in part of this, we did set up the recommendations. And if you do look at the report, you will see 4 categories of recommendations. One category was return to prior level of service, which is before the COVID funding, just what we did before, which would be way back, way cuts, almost like cuts, yeah. Second would be maintain current level of service, which would be keep it up to the level of the current staffing level, which has a community sports specialist, does add the human services manager, and then add some funding. Significant would be human services manager, maybe 2 community support specialists. And those, again, those specialist positions act like almost like direct service, because they are a little bit of hand holding, working with people, meeting them at agencies, things like that, going to Social Security office to help people sign up for things. And then, maybe twice as much money for agencies. And then transformative, we're talking about the human services levy, like something in the millions of dollars. So, but council did ask us to think big. So we thought big. So we'll see. We want to have something to build to. So that's what the arrow's going that way, to transformative. So in terms of the recommendations, these were the 6 recommendations. And you can see that in terms of the priorities for funding, in 3 categories, we've talked about housing and homelessness, behavioral health, basic needs. And then again, we wanted to make sure within those funding that we're prioritizing equity and access to services. So that's kind of like the tiebreaker, even though that's not really a thing in these types of programs, but we just want to make sure that agencies are understanding that and doing their best to provide that equity and access to their services. So, within the recommendations, update the priorities and develop the metrics, increase the contract services and funding, explore innovative programs that connect human services to housing strategies, increase administrative service staffing levels, maintain or increase community support specialists, and identify additional funding sources. One additional one that we did, that's not in the official report, that we did add because it came up, kind of an ad hoc one because it kept coming up with when we talked to council, was housing, obviously, right? They are working on the comprehensive plan, and affordable housing keeps coming up. When they were talking about the transportation impact fees, they kept talking about reducing fees for senior housing, reducing fees for affordable housing, and things like that. So what we'd like to do and what we've asked for in the next budget is affordable housing, not plan, but like a feasibility study to finally look at, because they've asked a bunch of questions. Can we require certain apartments be built with 3 or 4 bedroom apartments? What would it look like to prioritize the city's surplus land for affordable housing? Just a bunch of different things. So we're hopeful that will get, because they're obviously very interested in affordable housing. We're hoping that will get approved and we can get moving on that. And that would be something we work with planning and economic development on, because they're interested in it too. So I'm excited to see where that goes next year, if it gets approved. So next steps. So kind of looking backward to look forward. The council did adopt the plan on April 8th. Was originally scheduled for April Fool's Day, but we dodged that. as Sundie mentioned, we do accept applications for we're now calling it our community fund, not competitive funding, for our community fund earlier this year, and that's for the 25-26 year. We did develop a implementation request asking to increase our funding amount for the next budget cycle. It's currently in city manager's review to be included in his budget. Additionally, a position for housing and human services manager in the budget. So council will review that if they both get included, and hopefully we'll have some news about that in November once the council approves the budget. And then all those things work out, we will work to implement additional metrics and the tracking starting in 2025. So we are excited to see what new information we can provide, what data is directing us, and kind of see where it brings us. And, Bill, having those conversations about what is an effective service, because right now it's really hard to say, I know they're doing the work, but is it effective? So, and with that, I'm happy to answer. Should we just give you both a mic? Or wait, hold on, let me give you a mic.
So the whole question of housing and homelessness, when you're dealing with an individual who's unhoused,
Mhm.
and how to get them into housing, I saw two things that really stood out to me in these current years. One is the Camp Unity East Side, and for good and bad, Camp Unity East Side is gone. And the reason it's gone is because all the people that were in that camp either got housing or moved on.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that happened is the camp decided that that's what they wanted. It wasn't somebody coming in and saying, hey, I'm going to get you housing. It was the camp saying, we want to make sure that we, all of us, get into housing. And the reason that works is because now there's an internal accountability. I mean, they used to set their own internal rules, but now the expectation of everybody in that camp is, what are we doing to get all of us into housing?
Mm-hmm.
It worked.
Mm.
The sad part of that story is they then disbanded Camp Unity East Side. They said, we've done our job. We've shown, that we could get into housing. End of story. Big mistake. I mean, they should have just said, now that we know that we can do this, let's keep moving people in. And the bright light for me is the Oaks, because they've moved, 90% of the people that were there 2 years ago are now in housing.
Mm.
That is what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, that's good.
So metrics that say not only how are you solving the problem, but how are you, building to make sure that this problem is really being minimized. I mean, we can't eliminate homelessness, but we can show that there are programs that actually put people back into housing. And along that line, again, a metric, Regional Crisis Response Agency. We're spending big bucks, but look at the money we're not spending. Look at the money we're not spending sending people to Harborview and King County Jail.
Absolutely.
And over time, people realize that when you spend money like that, it really does bring the problem back into manageable.
Yeah.
So this piece about the people we're serving, I ask them all the time, I know what I'm doing, but what are you doing to get out of your situation? And when people give me a blank stare, I say, I can't fix that for you.
Right.
If you're doing nothing, if you can't find any way to start working on the problem, you're really asking too much for everybody else to pitch in and do it. And I know there are people who can hardly do anything, but everybody can do something. And we need to make that part of our model. I helped Camp United We Stand get started, and they drove me crazy and I left. And the reason was because I didn't understand a very key piece. You can't help people to stay the way they are. You can't. It doesn't work. You have to have a partnership that says, we're gonna both work on getting you out of here,
Mhm.
but you gotta do your part. And I had a hard time coming to terms with that, but Camp United We Stand convinced me there's no other way, you know? So we need to make that incorporate into it. Yes, I want to help you, but what are you doing to help
Mhm.
yourself? How do we make that a piece of the
Mhm.
requirements?
Well, and it's definitely, I mean, the challenge I think is a city, we are a city of 60,000 and we working, our big agencies such as HopeLink are serving hundreds of thousands of people, really, all throughout. So in some ways, we do have to rely on their expertise as providers of housing, and ask those questions, right? Get their outcomes. And in fact, Suni and I were just looking at, Bristol has, our city manager, Bristol Ellington, has a large performance metrics project that not all of us, but some of us are working on with our measures. And one of those is effectiveness of human services programs. So Suni and I have been looking at, mostly Suni, has been looking at the reports that have come in. And one of them we were looking at was the housing one. So like I said, since we are a city of 60,000, we're not Seattle. We do have to rely on listening to the service providers that are serving, all these people and hearing some of those things. And you are a service provider, so we are listening to you. But yeah, it's those things that we have to. I don't know. It's hard to say that we're not a driver of things, but we have to be in the mix. But our funding is much smaller than say Seattle or even some of the East Side cities. So
I would like to see the city of Shoreline look at a overall balanced housing. I don't know what you would call it, but right now the mantra is missing middle, missing middle, missing middle. The middle isn't missing. It's in Bill's neighborhood. It's in my neighborhood. I think rather than, pinpointing specifics is to look at the overall picture. And yes, maybe we're missing middle housing, but we are missing affordable housing, and that is not necessarily the middle. So
right. So
it's a little disconcerting that, like, because this is a huge part,
Well, and
this human services and the people
Yeah.
who are really struggling.
So are you saying, so I would say two things, and let's see if I understand what you're saying.
Right.
Sorry, talking with my hands here. If I understand what you're saying. So I would say the entire housing is being looked at in a comprehensive plan.
Right.
And with that, I don't have much, like that's not my area.
No, there's a piece that
There's a piece, there's a piece that they let me comment on, which is the housing piece.
right.
Where we're looking at this study is the affordable housing piece.
Right.
And to be honest with you, even affordable housing, folks can make quite a bit because our at AMI in King County, for a family of 4, 80% of AMI is like $110,000.
Right.
So that is considered affordable housing. So it's not, these aren't super low income, but that's why my concern is this study will be looking at specifically at affordable housing because that's what we're being asked to do from council,
Right.
is looking at ways to fill that need here. So yeah. And in fact, even in the comprehensive plan, they have parts where they do need to talk specifically about affordable housing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
because I see in my neighborhood, specifically around the light rail station,
Mhm.
the affordable housing is being torn down so that we can have multi-family
Right.
unaffordable housing.
Well, and that's a great point. You make a great point, Patty, because there is we're going to be looking at some the idea of displacement, which is
Right.
what that is.
Which is huge.
Yeah,
it's really big. I know
if
I
we're
see it from-
considering anti-displacement policies, what that would look like, because there are certain apartments that I've coined this phrase. I'm sure somebody else coined it. I call it naturally affordable because
Right.
they're older, they're not maybe maintained as well, and so they're just naturally less expensive.
Right.
And so folks that live there may be lower income just by basis of the rent and how the condition of the building
Right.
is.
So I know for Ridgecrest and for North City, with the stations going in,
Mhm.
the first big developments that are happening in Ridgecrest, there's already been one, but there is a whole bunch coming. And there is a giant one done, and there's a whole bunch
Yeah.
coming in North City.
Yeah.
That is the area because it's next to the freeway.
Mhm.
That was the most affordable housing that we had.
So all of the multifamily housing going in the station areas have mandatory affordability built in.
Yeah, but it's not affordable like the houses that.
Right,
took
I
out.
understand that,
Right,
but
right.
they have to have a percentage,
Right.
and don't quote me on it, because I,
Right.
it's a little bit more
Well, I know,
complicated. than
because
it-
my husband's in construction. And
Yeah.
he's worked some big.
Yeah,
big
so
projects downtown. and
It's
he
affordable
says
in
there,
perpetuity, yeah.
Affordable is all of the units that are like studios that are right above the garage.
No,
He said, but that's what he said, what was.
no,
had
no,
happened in
no.
Seattle at one time.
We don't do that here.
No,
We,
I'm not
they,
saying that we
no,
are.
no, we don't do that. So they have to be, they are contracted in certain units. They have to be dispersed throughout the building.
Right.
They have to be with the same materials and all of that. There's
And
all
then
sorts.
that's really good to
Yeah.
hear because in
In
the past, and I'm not saying in
No, I know.
Shoreline, but I'm just saying
We-
in the
yeah.
past, that was.
we
not-
don't want it to be the fourth floor is the floor, if you know what I mean, and things
Right.
like that. So yeah, it
Well, yeah,
shouldn't.
because it creates a stigma for the people.
Absolutely.
Who end up living.
Absolutely. The contract that we have with them has the unit numbers listed. So yes, and
That
we
was a
actually,
thumbs up for those of
yeah,
you that can't.
good. We actually, our MFTE person who does the mandatory affordable, too, looks at plans and measures and things like that. So
Good.
yeah, we
Thank you.
we have exact units, and if occasionally what will happen is if like somebody, if the unit is a 401, that was in the contract, let's say that person's lived there for 3 years, they got a promotion, yep, they're great now, they're making a bunch more money, and they no longer qualify, and they want to stay there, that's great, but now they have to pay market rate or whatever, right?
Right.
So they want to stay there. And so what we do is we do a amendment to their contract, and we find a unit that's exactly like that one. And then we amend it to be 301 or something else. So
Okay,
we keep
great.
track of it. Yeah,
Right,
for
so
sure.
that you don't lose those affordable.
Correct. Oh, no, we
units.
don't lose them.
Right,
Yeah, we
right.
keep track. And like I said, we don't put them above the garage. They have to be throughout the, yeah, that's a good question though. Yeah, because they'll do anything if you let them. Yeah, we want to make it seem like, yeah. So,
Just like everybody
yep, just like everybody else. It shouldn't be, the bad views, right? Dispersed throughout the building. So,
Well, I was gonna say too, just one more thing, as far as affordability
Yeah.
goes, so, affordability with, and this is part of this missing middle, but I know for, the water district,
Mhm.
the only people for the water district that live in Shoreline are the 3 commissioners. Because we have to live here by law, because we're elected to
Mhm.
represent our districts. None of the employees for the water district live in Shoreline because none of the employees with a working wage can afford to live in Shoreline.
Mhm.
So, which is kind of sad.
Yeah, it's increase their wages. I was gonna say I have how many?
A lot, but not be able to buy a house big enough for
Mm.
3 kids.
All right. Well, thank you for coming. You know how to get a hold of us, specifically seniors. Trim this off.
Well, usually they're